100,000 soldiers were discharged in the wake of budget cuts.
Wow.
Part of the funds freed up from these reforms were instead diverted to the development of a national arms industry. Making a profit off of weapons of war was deemed more lucrative than sustaining an unnecessarily large fighting force. Competitively priced Ukrainian-manufactured tanks, APCs, and aircraft soon made their way onto the international market.
Hey troops, welcome back to the channel. My name's Ryan. I'm a former Royal Marines Commando. Today we're going to be reacting to Ukraine's modern military. Obviously the Ukraine war's still going on, guys. It's still in the news. Not so much, of course, these days, but still there, lingering, okay? So we're going to get into this one today. As always, guys, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It really does help me out. Drop a comment below and go and visit the original channel, Animated History. Link is in the description, as always, troops. Looking forward to this one. Let's get it.
By 2003, the military reforms were officially Ukraine. In late February of 2022, many assumed that the young nation's days were numbered. Yet over a year later, the Ukrainian military still seems far from defeated, and the outcome of the conflict still hangs in the balance. I'm Griffin Johnson, the armchair historian, and today we're taking a closer look at the making of the modern Ukrainian military, the fighting force that has surprised both friend and foe alike.
I think they've surprised friend and foe, but let's be realistic about this. The reason they've surprised people is, you know, they're a good fighting force. Let's not take it away from them, but there wouldn't be anything near what we've seen on the news in different articles and stuff like that if it wasn't for Western support. You know, Western support in terms of the infrastructure, military infrastructure specifically, that they're getting for the battlefield, you know, just to kind of keep their foot through the door. If that support stopped, we'd see a very, very different war, guys. Let's be very realistic about this.
As the Soviet Union buckled under its own weight in 1991, Ukraine emerged as one of several newly independent nations from Eastern Europe. With collapse came inheritance, as Kyiv suddenly found itself in possession of a large chunk of the former Soviet military. This force included various armies, approximately 6,500 tanks, over 7,000 armored vehicles, a significant air force of around 1,500 combat aircraft, and a naval presence in the form of over 95 vessels of all sizes.
That's a lot of stuff, guys. I'm just looking at the air support, you know, over 1,500 combat airplanes. That's a lot, all right? That's a lot to sustain any country around the world, all right? At least to have, you know, at least a good standing fighting chance. Them numbers are good.
With 780,000 personnel, the armed forces of Ukraine were among the largest militaries on the continent.
Just to put that into context, troops, the United Kingdom at this moment in time has like, what, 80,000 total? Maybe it's a couple of thousand here and there, but around about 80,000. The Royal Marines are about 4,000 or 5,000 on a good day. So, yeah, that dwarfs us massively.
However, sustaining a fighting force of that size would prove highly costly and impractical at a time where a major European conflict seemed out of the question. As such, the Ukrainian government opted to significantly reduce the size of its military. Over 100,000 soldiers were discharged in the wake of budget cuts.
That's a lot.
Part of the funds freed up from these reforms were instead diverted to the development of a national arms industry. Making a profit off of weapons of war was deemed more lucrative than sustaining an unnecessarily large fighting force.
Probably is one of the most lucrative businesses on the planet. War.
Competitively priced Ukrainian-manufactured tanks, APCs, and aircraft soon made their way onto the international market. By 2003, the military reforms were officially completed. The size of the armed forces had shrunk to about 295,000 personnel. In 2010, this number would further be reduced to around 200,000, and would subsequently drop as low as 130,000 when conscription was ended in October of 2013.
See, you're only as good as the numbers, guys, and I'm seeing a pattern here, okay? This looks like the British military, for instance, and probably America as well. Not too sure on the American numbers, but Great Britain, all right, when we went through Kosovo and Iraq and all of the wars then in the 70s, 80s, 90s, yeah, our military was much bigger, the infrastructure was bigger because the demand was needed, okay? There was a big demand there. Now, not so much, but seems to be a similar story here occurring in Ukraine. I wonder what it's like within your country, your residents, guys. Let me know in the comments if this is the same story.
On the geopolitical front, the new government in Kyiv was among the first of former Soviet bloc nations to begin fostering closer relations with the NATO military alliance. In 1995, NATO aided Ukraine during the Kharkiv drinking water disaster, and 2 years later, the NATO-Ukraine Commission was established. By 2004, relations had progressed to the point that Kyiv approved policies aimed toward deepening its ties with NATO through political and economic reforms, establishing a commission for cooperation with the alliance, and opening the door to joint military exercises. President Viktor Yushchenko, who led the country from 2005 to 2010, became the face of pro-Western alignment and made it his official policy to push Ukraine toward total independence from Russia, while actively seeking to have his country join NATO. During the 2008 Bucharest summit, NATO declared Ukraine's permission for NATO membership, welcoming them to join whenever they wanted, so long as they met the criteria for accession outlined in Article 10 of the North Atlantic Treaty. Given Ukraine's tender position, the requirements were considerable. Not only would Ukraine have to secure political and public support for NATO, they would also have to commit national resources to defense spending, regional cooperation, and arms compatibility with other NATO members. This latter requirement would be especially difficult given that the majority of Ukraine's military stockpile was Soviet surplus. While Yushchenko pushed on, the government remained traditional.
Yeah, so I guess that's worth thinking about for a second, troops. So surplus kit and equipment, although you can be quite effective with it, you're not going to be effective with it in a modern military scenario, and we've seen that actually in Ukraine right now. A lot of the modern kit and equipment that's being sent and utilized by Ukrainians specifically is hindering, you know, the movement massively for Russia. They've got a lot of kit and equipment, but it's all surplus stuff, or a lot of it is surplus stuff. You know, some of the Jeeps that they've been using, some of the wagons that they've been using, you know, 20, 30, 40 years old in some cases. The tires haven't even been looked after, all right? Just literally left on airfields, left to rot and decay and get sunlight damage. These things are, you know, in numbers pretty good, but in reality not actually that effective. So hit on a very good point there. Might have the numbers, surplus kit and equipment. Yeah, you've got to kind of disregard that a little bit, troops, okay?
Additionally divided on the issue of joining NATO. Due to its economic dependence with Russia, militarily, Kyiv maintained close relations with Russia until the fateful events of 2014. After Russian-backed separatist forces in the Donbass region rose up in rebellion and Russian troops moved to annex the Crimean Peninsula, the Ukrainian military began a period of expansion that has continued up to the present day. Although the fighting up to 2022 was contained to the two separatist regions and officially only involved Ukrainian and separatist forces, Moscow's influence in the area was overt, and the government in Kyiv continued to fear an eventual full-scale Russian invasion. Investments into the depleted armed forces grew exponentially, and by July 2022, close to half a year after the Russian invasion, then Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexander Resnikov stated that the armed forces now number over 700,000 personnel, amounting to 2 armored and 13 mechanized brigades, 2 mountain brigades, 7 rocket and artillery brigades, as well as 225 aircraft. To sustain and further develop this,
don't fire your weapon system like that, though. He's not even firing it from the hip, he's firing it from the tit.
Fighting force, Ukraine's defense budget has skyrocketed to
Never fire your weapon from the tit.
$8.3 billion in 2022, a number which is projected to increase even further this year. The spectacular increase in defense spending has resulted in a similarly impressive influx of new weaponry and equipment of all types. However, with fighting in the country ongoing, it is difficult to accurately determine the quantities of operational equipment in use. Equipment and vehicle types that have made their way to the front are in constant flux due to the haphazard arrival of armament deliveries from pro-Western and NATO countries, ranging from a wide variety of small arms to several artillery systems and even tanks. Before we continue, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Raycon Movies, and sharing my audio more toggle of fun dog. Before the large-scale arrival of Western equipment, the standard gear of the Ukrainian army mostly consisted of a selection of weapons from its own arms industry. Besides its stockpile of AK-type assault rifles and light machine guns from the Soviet era, the Ukrainian army has relied on the TAR-21 or Fort 221 bullpup assault rifle as its service weapon of choice. Although initially only utilized by special forces and the Ukrainian security service, the rifle has since made its way to regular divisions as well. To bolster its long-range capabilities, Ukrainian infantry have relied on the VPR-308 sniper rifle, which, with its light frame and increased effective range, has been an upgrade from the older and much more cumbersome Soviet SVD rifle. In terms of explosive firepower, Ukrainian soldiers are equipped with the homemade UAG-40 automatic grenade launcher.
These things are so destructive. I remember getting my hands on one. Was in Delta Company, my first fighting unit, and then it was FSG Fire Support Group, which was a troop basically added into the company. And they obviously had control of these, the 50 cals, GPMG, the suppressive fire. It's just unbelievable bits of kit. And what these can do is extreme amount of damage in a small amount of time. You don't want to be on the receiving end of a GMG, a general a grenade machine gun, okay? They're going to mess up anyone's day, that's for sure.
Its high level of portability and ease of use make it a desirable weapon in both open ground and urban settings. Finally, for its anti-tank capabilities, Ukrainian ground units use the Stugna P anti-tank missile system. Fired from T-55 tanks and the MT-12 field gun, the Stugna's laser-guided system can hit moving targets with a range of up to 5 kilometers and penetrate armor with up to 800 millimeters in thickness. The Ukrainian military command has also invested much into the army's artillery capabilities, including artillery locating radars, battery command, and control systems. To enhance the efficiency of its artillery corps, Ukrainian command has put special emphasis on the training and formation of new drone forward observation and fire coordination units. The Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 armed drone has become such a crucial component of the Ukrainian armed forces that there are plans underway to establish local production of these drones in the vicinity of Kyiv. In addition to Ukrainian-made weaponry, the armed forces continue to be amply supplied with both American-made Javelin anti-tank missile systems.
So effective, these bits of kit. We saw them being utilized an awful lot in Afghanistan. Very, very effective, guys, okay? Now, you've got to understand the importance of this bit of kit. Why are they so important? Well, they can be used effectively by anybody, okay? Now, when I say anybody, you've got to be trained on the piece of kit and equipment anyway to be effective on it, but pretty simple to use, okay, by any infantier. You're going to have specialist groups of infantry groups using this, getting a bit of kit and equipment, but the importance is you can get them in, you can get them out, you can get the job done really, really quickly. They can be widely dispersed among the troops, and just they can be there, hands-on, ready to go. So if you need it pretty quickly, it's not going to take a lot of time to set up. It's not going to be too hard to learn. Most importantly, if there's only one or two of you guys know how to use this in a section, you'd be able to teach someone relatively quickly how to use this if they got taken out of the battle space. So yeah, and the most important part of this, they're not just easy to use, they're very, very effective, okay? They do what they say on the tin. You want to get, some heavy armament out of the battle space, out and away, there's a tank coming, right, get this thing fired, take it out there. And it's It saves a lot of time, a lot of hassle, and strategically speaking, they can just be utilized pretty much anywhere, guys. Really, really good bits of kit.
As well as British-made NLAW rocket launchers. The American Security Assistance Program alone has amounted to $2.7 billion worth of weapons and equipment between 2014 and early 2022.
Crazy amount.
The Ukrainian Air Force, for its part, has given priority to upgrading the nation's large existing air defense network with its wide array of Soviet-era air defense systems. The Navy, similarly, has primarily focused on purchasing small-sized vessels in accordance with its aptly named Mosquito Doctrine, which envisions rapid hit-and-run attacks against the larger Russian Navy with agile patrol boats equipped with guided missiles as well as unmanned kamikaze drones. The nature of service and conscription within the military has also undergone many changes. Under the Soviet Union, all able-bodied males were required to serve 2 years in the armed forces or 3 years in the Navy. Mandatory conscription was stopped briefly in October 2013, with the armed forces being made up of 40% conscripts and 60% contract soldiers. However, less than 1 year later, acting President Alexander Turchinov reinstated conscription in May of 2014 with a modified target of males between the ages of 20 to 27 over the previous 18 to 25. In 2017, over 14,000 individuals enlisted in the Ukrainian armed forces for contract service. However, draft evasion had been an ongoing issue since its reimplementation in 2014. By 2022, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the end of conscription by January 1st, 2024, along with an increase in professional servicemen and improved compensation and housing.
The thing is, right, guys, you know, I served in the military. I did my bit in the Royal Marines Commandos. I'm in two minds with conscription now. Now, in the event of your country being absolutely decimated and invaded, that's different, okay? You know, if there's a chance that everyone's going to be wiped out anyway, then yeah, get everyone involved, every man and his dog, so to speak. But in terms of conscription, I don't know how I feel about that because, you know, it's hard enough volunteering yourself to this job, knowing how hard it is, but also wanting to be there. I can't imagine not wanting to do this job. Some people really, really don't want to do this job, but they get conscribed into doing it anyway. And let's be honest, you can die. There's a strong chance in war that you're going to die, get seriously injured or maimed, and that's the best of us, okay? There's a strong chance of that. Now imagine not wanting to be there. I don't know, guys. I'm in two minds. I'm swaying, you know, in the worst case scenario, yeah, get every man and his dog because there's a chance that you're going to die anyway, so you might as well die fighting for your country. But I understand not a lot of people think like that, and I really don't know, guys. I really don't know. It's a tricky one. Generic conscription, is it really effective if you haven't got, you know, the guts and the guile to be there in the first place? There's something to be said about volunteers, guys, and that's one thing I'll say in Great Britain. There's a lot of people volunteer, and our standards prove that volunteering obviously gets the best out of those individuals. They want to be there. Conscription, unless there's like another world war, is it really effective? Maybe you guys can help me out in the chat.
However, the Russian invasion disrupted these plans, and popular mobilization occurred, including the recruitment of prisoners with combat experience. After the start of the war in the Donbass region in 2014, Kyiv set to identify key weak points within its armed forces. The review found that rampant corruption, poor logistics and medical care, inefficient command, and overall inability to combat cyber attacks all contributed to poor combat performance on the battlefield. To remedy these shortcomings, then President Petro Poroshenko directed sweeping reforms in all these areas. Amongst these changes was a vital initiative to radically change the culture surrounding lower-level command structure, which had previously insisted that lower-level leaders wait for approval from higher headquarters for every desired move. Now the idea was that leaders on the ground would be encouraged to take initiative wherever applicable. Due to fears of a looming Russian invasion, Poroshenko's reforms were given absolute priority and set to be completed in just 4 years. By the time the Russian forces moved into Ukraine's territory in 2022, the Ukrainian armed forces would prove a far more formidable foe than the one Russian troops had met 8 years prior. On February 24, 2022, Ukraine's worst fears were confirmed as Russian forces crossed into Ukraine across multiple fronts targeting key centers, such as Odessa, Kharkiv, and Kyiv. However, Russia's plan for a swift victory had been thwarted, as the newly reformed Ukrainian armed forces were able to withstand the initial invasion despite their tenuous position. The defense of Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, was vital in denying Russia one of their most important strategic objectives, while the displays of tenacity, such as that in Mariupol, showed the extremes to which many Ukrainian volunteers were willing to go. Since 2014, a key component of the Ukrainian defensive strategy has been the construction of trench lines, which have helped consolidate and hold territory under their control. Since 2022, this strategy has remained, with major trench lines becoming key factors toward the static war that has since developed ever since the Russian advance began to slow down. Even as recently as the Battle of Bakhmut, Ukrainian soldiers are hunkered down, waiting for the attrition of their enemies to blunt any further offensives that may occur later down the line. Within a span of just 30 years, the Ukrainian military has transformed itself from a bloated relic of its Soviet past into a modern fighting force, seemingly capable of going toe-to-toe against one of the strongest militaries in the world.
I would agree with that in terms of their warfighting capability. Yes, their skills and drills have been drastically improved. The command structure seems to replicate, NATO a little bit more, especially the way the United Kingdom runs things, i.e. given a little bit more command and control to the junior leaders, the people such as, the officers commanding troops and companies and stuff, giving them a little bit more power to be able to be freedom of movement, so to speak, on the battle space. That's always been in place pretty much for the past 100 years, at least, with the British military way of doing things, and we do things pretty good in that regard, so that's a good upgrade. But be rest assured, guys, all of those decision makings wouldn't be suffice if they didn't have... Support is one thing, moral support is another, but actual monetary support to be able to give Ukraine the armament, the weapons, the munitions, the assets such as the HIMARS rocket systems, the artillery kit and equipment, tanks, all of the small vehicles that they've got, all the mechanized armored vehicles that they've got. All of this is making a big, big difference. You can be as skilled as you want, but without the kit and equipment to actively fight the monster of Russia, it's going to be useless, all right? It's like, yeah, I've got all the skills, but I haven't got the kit and equipment. You need that support. So all of this is all well and good, but the main thing for this is the support that they've been getting, guys. We need to not forget that. That's the reason that they've been more successful than previously thought.
Rekindling of ties to NATO and the West has arguably contributed much to this process over the years. But unlike several other Western-backed militaries around the world, the Ukrainian armed forces have thus far surpassed all expectations and
I would agree with that. That was a fantastic video, actually, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. So my opinion on that, Ukraine's modern military. Yes, a lot has changed over the past few years, especially when the Crimea annexation of that happened in 2014-ish. Yeah, a lot's changed. Command structure mainly, but more importantly, the support from the West has changed drastically. They're getting an awful lot more support. It didn't seem to be dwindling. If it did, that would be pretty much the end of this war, I think, anyway, in Russia's favor. Hopefully that doesn't happen so we can keep on going the way we're going, but something else needs to change to see a bit more traction to get this war ended in Ukraine's favor, guys. I don't know what that answer is. I thought I knew what it was, a couple of months ago, but I'm not so sure anymore. I don't think we can just keep on feeding the beast the way we're doing it. When's enough going to be enough in terms of actual support before we can go, you know what, Russia's not really gaining a foothold anymore. They're not really gaining as much traction, but they're certainly not losing any either. So it's a bit of a stalemate. It has been for a long time. Granted, Bakhmut was to and fro, and then Russia got it, and then I really don't know, guys. This is a tricky one. I see this going on for a long time yet, unfortunately, but that was a fantastic video, guys. If you do want to support me further, consider joining the Patreon. And yeah, I'm now an online coach, so coaching link will be in the description as well, guys. If you want me to train you, go check that out. It's pretty good stuff. But other than that, like, share, subscribe. I'll see you in the comments. Peace.